Oftentimes, managing several students at once in a computer lab can be a challenging experience for teachers. Fortunately, Windows Multipoint Server not only gives teachers tools to better manage the PC experience of their students and keep them on task, but it also reduces the total cost of PC ownership relative to a one-to-one environment down by over 60%. I'd like you to imagine that my name is Mr. Adam Barr, and I'm a middle school teacher at Contoso Middle School. Now, today I'd like to teach a lesson on trees to my students, and so I've brought them to our computer lab, which actually contains several Windows Multipoint Server units. So here's a picture of a Windows Multipoint Server unit. As you can see, there's one central server unit, and there are several monitors and keyboards connected to that unit either directly or through a thin client. Now, as you know, one of the challenges with working with students in a computer lab is actually monitoring what they're doing and making sure that they're on task. So fortunately, Windows Multipoint Server contains something called the Windows Multipoint Manager, which simplifies this for me. Let's take a look at how this works. Now here we are looking at my screen. Now I'm actually logged into one of the stations of the Windows Multipoint Server, and I could have actually done this directly from my laptop and not being physically connected to the server, but logging into the server through remote desktop connection on any Windows PC. So in the corner here, you'll notice this icon here. This is actually what I mentioned called the Windows Multipoint Manager. And this will allow me to manage each of my students' stations so that I can make sure that they're on task. Now, as you can see here, each station has a student associated with it. Here's my station. Now, in addition to having this view, I can actually drill down into what each student's doing by clicking on the Desktops tab. And here I'm afforded a thumbnail view of each of the students' stations. Now, fortunately, with this view, I can double-click on any thumbnail and get a full screen view. And as it lo and behold, this student here is off task. So I can go ahead and close this application on this station directly just by clicking Close Application. Or, for example, one of the challenges that I have working with a large group of students in the lab is that oftentimes there are a lot of distractions, such as their web browser, and it's very difficult for me to get their attention. So I can go ahead and actually block all of the stations and set a custom message such as 123 all eyes on me. So now the students know that I need their attention. Now, as I mentioned, I'd like to actually teach a lesson on trees. Rather than have to project my lesson onto an interactive whiteboard, I can actually project the lesson directly from my screen onto the screens of all my students' stations at the Windows Multipoint Server. So to do this, all I need to do is select Project My Station to Selected Stations, and I'm going to select all of these stations first, and then select that. And as you can see, one by one, the thumbnails change to be exactly what I have on my screen. So if I go ahead and snap you can see that each student is seeing exactly what I'm doing on my screen, and this includes any annotations, and they see this in real time. Now, when I'm done with my lesson, I can simply stop the projection. Now that I'm done with my lesson, I'd like to share it out with my students. So a simple thing that I can do, go ahead and minimize the Multipoint Manager, is I can take my lesson and drop it into any empty folder, and I've just named this folder Trees Lesson. Now if I right-click and select Share With, I can choose exactly which students I'd like to share my lesson with, or I can just change it to all of the students that are on the Multipoint server. So if I click Share, I can now email the link to all my students, and they'll all have access to this on their individual station. So now my students are ready to research, and if I go back to my Windows Multipoint Manager, I see that one of the students has already opened up a Bing search to research trees, And I think this is a best practice. So I'd actually like the rest of my students to see this. So I'm going to go ahead and select Project Selected Station to all other stations. And now all the students are seeing the work that's being done on this student's screen. Now, of course, I can have the student come up to the front of the class and talk everyone through what they're doing on their screen. Now, oftentimes, when going to the computer lab, it often turns out that there'll be fewer computers than students. Now, in the past, this made it really difficult because the students would obviously have to have some other activity, and I would have had to plan that activity. But fortunately, with Windows Multipoint Server, you can take a single station, that is a monitor, a keyboard, mouse connected to the Windows Multipoint Server, and you can split it so that two students can share a monitor but have separate keyboards and mice. Now, this is exactly what you're seeing with the demo stations 5 and 5.split. As you can see, they're a bit narrower than the other demo stations, but yet the student still has a complete Windows 7 experience. Now, the IT department at my school also likes this because it can save them money on stations. Now, sometimes you get an unexpectedly large class. Of course, you can't just split every screen and accommodate all the students. Now, for example, today, Miss Jennifer Kim, one of my fellow teachers, was absent, and I'm actually having to bring her students along with my students into the computer lab. And so obviously it becomes important that I be able to manage all the students, even if they're on separate multi-point servers. Now, Multipoint Manager makes this easy. I can just go to the home screen, and I can add another server just by selecting Add or Remove Computers. Now, if I go back to my thumbnails view, I can see all of the other stations from the other Windows Multipoint Server, which I've now just added. So I'm able to manage all of these sessions at once.